made the news yet. We as a firm are going to no longer perform any school district audits. So we're stepping away from that work. So we shared the news already with Mr. Fry and Dr. Fox and Mr. Bart. So usually school districts will issue an RFP and you request some other proposals from firms to perform the audit services going forward. We're still here for you until you have a new relationship to help with the transition and answer questions. But as a firm, we're just exiting that work.
And I guess the question I have for the betterment of the community and the taxpayers is, did the district make progress from 2020, 2021 to 21, 22 in terms of where we were at and where we are moving forward to? Have we made progress on some of the issues that we had in the audit?
Yeah, there's definitely momentum in the right direction. You're on a better track. There's still work to be done. So
yes.
That's for sure. But we're headed in the right path. So that's great to see.
Well, thank you very much on behalf of my team. I know that we deeply appreciate you and Kristen and Anna and Ann and everybody. And I just wanted to thank you for all your work and thank you for keeping Dr. Fox in line and I just want to thank you for everything that you guys have done for us. Seriously.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to work with you, and thank you, and all the best to you and your future endeavors.
Thank you.
All right, I'll ask the question for everybody. So what was the $1 million in iPads for? Because I thought that lease was billed yearly, and I don't remember spending $1 million in 1 year.
I can clarify that if I may.
Go for it.
This is it's really an accounting entry. So when you issue in the general fund, when you issue a lease, you have to record the entire future lease payments as an expense and also as a revenue, because you have these lease proceeds coming in. So they net to zero, basically. There doesn't represent really any cash transaction. And then each year, when you make those lease payments, like you just mentioned, then the real expense will happen without the lease proceed influx coming in. I hope that clarified it. It's just
it did for me.
Good. It's just an accounting entry, but your cash flow will happen like you guys planned.
I totally appreciate the accounting entry because I have no clue what you're talking about there. But I guess what I don't understand is why the next year, if you said it zeroes out, why was it $1 million in 1 year and then the next year it didn't zero out? Does that make sense? Like when you were talking about, I think it was under support services or instructional services. In 2021, it was $1 million more, and you had said because we had $1 million lease expenditure for the iPads, but the next year it didn't. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, so I guess you would still have some expense. You would still have the expense of the lease payment, but not the full $1 million like you had to present in the first year. So maybe the difference isn't $1 million and zero. It's $1 million and whatever the annual lease payment was that you had to make.
Okay. I'll just have to go with I don't understand, I guess.
We can maybe follow up with an email to lay it out a little bit better.
I guess what I'm trying to grapple is that we never did $1 million in 1 year. We never outlaid $1 million in 1 year.
Yeah, not in cash, no.
Not in any way. My understanding is we did not. It wasn't. There was no expenditure of $1 million. And so that's what, but maybe it's not worth belaboring right now, but that's why it just struck me when you said.
The total lease was the total lease for the Apple product was $1 million. So you represented it on the financial statements as an expense that will be expended out over the period of time. But as you pay it off, that expense starts to wean itself off in actual cash payments. So it's just an expense that is recorded on your financial statements And then as it starts to become paid off, then it starts to liquidate itself off of the financial statement. So it's not like you paid $1 million in cash out the door. It's just represented on your financial statements as a liability. So it's like a liability, almost like a paid. And then when you start to liquidate it off, like liquidated means you pay the cash out. I don't know if, Nicole, you can interrupt me if I'm wrong. And then as you start paying the cash off, then you start to, like, as you make the payments of $200 and some thousand off each year, which we are paying off, which is what we will talk about in the next presentation, we will then start taking that expense off and that's what you'll see in the budget presentation as well. So that's the expenditure you have on the book. That's the expenditure you have on the books. It's just a different way, and the way that the governmental entities and the regulations want you to present it on your financial statement also changed as well. So.
Yeah, it's confusing. Not a fan of that accounting standard at all. It's like you're expending it twice.
Okay.
But I'll follow up with an email. And
Yeah, when they send the email out, I'll have John forward it out to all you guys as well.
Okay.
And if there's any follow-up questions, I will then forward them along. Like they said, they'll still be available to us until we transition to a new auditing
Okay.
firm.
All right, thank you.
How she explained it the first time is you don't see in that first year the revenue that offset that liability of the 1 million, so they zeroed out. Because there's revenue of that just zeroes out that liability of the 1 million for the lease because it's how it balances out. Never mind. We'll just.
I'd like to echo certainly what Mr. Bard said about your partnership. From day one, when I came on, you've been welcoming. Your firm has been welcoming. Everybody has taken the time to explain to me. It's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose at times, and you were patient with me, allow me the chance to ask questions, and allow me the chance to grow and learn. We appreciate that partnership. We're sad that you decided to move away from schools because we wanted one more year to continue to work with you and show, and we're proud of the work we've done, confident in the work that we'll continue to do, and thank you for that partnership. And it's good to know you're still a phone call away until we finally sign on with somebody else. So thank you.
yeah, thank you very much. And I'll email tomorrow with some answers.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I believe this is our fourth presentation now from Crabtree. At this time, Mr. Anthony Colstock and Dr. Fred Witham. We've worked with them here over the course of the last month to talk and look a little bit about some of our educational concerns, deficiencies that after meeting with some of our principals, talking about some of our vision for teaching and learning, and where that might certainly lead into some presentations this evening.
Maybe
Colstock?
maybe we should offer you a seat on the board since you're here so often.
We'll share our salary with you.
Thank you. What's that?
Did somebody accidentally get two? No, Peter's leaving it, so. Am I able to use this to click the pages, or do I need you to? No. Oh, awesome. Great, thank you. Okay, so the update that we're going to give you for this month is what we looked at was the educational program. If you recall, when we were doing the analysis of your building capacity compared to your current enrollment and your projected enrollment. We had meetings with the administration to understand how you're using the spaces. So from how you're using that space, we can calculate the capacity. But we also understand some additional spaces that are being used that you don't receive capacity for. So that is the educational program. It's basically, how do you use the space within the building? How can the architecture help you deliver the curriculum? So part of the study that we want to also review with you is, if you want to make revisions to your educational program in the future, how can that be worked into the study for long-term planning? So as I mentioned, we've met multiple times with the administration and the building principal to understand how you're currently using the spaces, and then also had some discussion with the principals. Maybe what are some spaces that you need that may help you bring on new curriculum or be flexible with the current curriculum that you have. One of the things that was noted multiple times by the administration is the need for more student-focused spaces rather than teacher-focused classrooms, but collaborative spaces, flexible spaces to get students kind of out of the cells and bells of the classrooms. A lot of times those spaces will be larger, that you can bring in multiple classes, that you could bring in potentially a team. We've had districts that wanted to design those types of spaces so that there's a lot of flexibility with small group individuals or with a large group learning. So felt that the administration felt there was a need for those types of spaces within the school. We also looked at your current grade structure, which is very straightforward. Don't think that there was anything that the administration wanted to make a recommendation on changing. You have just the 3 transitions. The less transitions, the better for students. The last thing then what we looked at is, where are you deficient in space? So certain comments that were made is, yeah, we have this room, we have this art classroom, but it's not quite large enough for us. Maybe it's lacking a little bit in storage or classroom space for tables and chairs, and to get a certain amount of students in there comfortably. So this was kind of the discussions that we've had, and this educational program, while we didn't really get into tons and tons of extra detail, if you were to embark on a project, we would come back to this educational program to revisit it, potentially do a visioning exercise with more stakeholders rather than just the administration, but potentially with faculty, potentially with students. So be part of the process to help build that educational program in more detail. And then depending on what that program is, then see how it fits into your facilities. That will help determine if a building project may be renovation only, or if a building project would then require additions to it. So the way that we're going to show these deficiencies is, it's just going to be a graphic analysis of the floor plans that are to scale, and then we're going to compare it to where you're deficient, and also show those spaces to scale, just to kind of give you a picture speaks 1,000 words. So just to understand where you're missing some spaces. One of the other things I want to note, just on the bottom, we did not talk about desired adjacencies. or we're not going to show you some of the desired adjacencies in this presentation, but we certainly talked about them with the administration. I can kind of highlight a couple of them right now. At the elementary school, there seemed to be a lot of special education classrooms that were clustered. That's typically what is not recommended. Special education classrooms should be interjected in with the general classrooms. And we understand that a lot of times when you're looking for space, that if it's a program that is new to that school year, and typically it may be a special education classroom, the location that you put it in is, well, where do we have space? Well, this is the space that it's at. And sometimes it's not intended for all of them to be clustered together. It just kind of happens that way. But again, this is for future planning, that if you ever wanted to embark on a project, then that's the type of adjacencies that you're going to start to look at. How can you intermingle the special education with the general population? Another one at the elementary school is the lack of natural daylight in the majority of the classes. So an adjacency would be have all the classrooms along an exterior wall so they can all receive sunlight. If you're all familiar with, should be familiar with studies on student well-being and student health and how natural daylight can improve those factors. There are 17 classrooms in the elementary school that do not have windows and receive natural daylight. And then the last one is a couple of adjacencies for the music department and the physical education department at the high school. And in particular, the fitness room or the weight room and how it's adjacent to the music wing. And that's a kind of a poor adjacency to have it by the music classrooms rather than by the gymnasium, and then also with the access to it that you have to exit the building to get to it. So those were some things that we did talk about. We're not going to show those in this presentation, but again, if you do embark on a project, those are the types of things that we would eventually look at. And even when we start developing options, those would be things that we would want to address. So as far as the educational program deficiencies, I have a quick list over here for each of the schools and give you a big picture of the amount of square footage that all those spaces equate to. And it's really not that much. 5, 6, 7,000 square feet. Now, this is just for the educational space. If this space, if we couldn't carve out this extra space within the existing footprint and we had to put on additions, just keep in mind, you would still need additional square footage for circulation, for hallways, for stair towers, for building support, whether it's storage, restrooms, mechanical, electrical closets, things of that nature. So here's the elementary school, and you'll see just down here in the corner, these are the deficiencies. So one of the rooms that, or one of the spaces that we discussed is, it's more of a want than a need, but a pre-kindergarten program. Typically, those are going to be same square footage as a regular classroom. Then the collaboration spaces that I mentioned in the light blue. And if you want to orient yourself, this is all color-coded. You can see this legend up on the top left-hand corner to kind of give you an idea of what those spaces would be. So there would be some type of learning commons or collaborative learning area that would be large enough for a few classrooms, a few classes to share. And again, this is all to scale. So if you were to, based upon projects that we have done of similar size and scope, that is about the size of these types of spaces that we're designing in other schools. And then also the gymnasium. Your current gymnasium is not large enough for a competitive basketball court, and I believe it does also not have a seating capacity. So this would be very beneficial to the community to have another gymnasium that could then support competitive events. And then it was also discussed that the nursing area was also undersized, and then that undersized nursing area potentially lead to some privacy issues and student health and safety. So,
If I can, real quick, the idea of a competitive gymnasium or a gymnasium, when we started having those conversations about the size, wasn't just rooted in athletics. Certainly, we had the discussion, Mr. Colstock, right, of the idea at the elementary school that there's not a space where the student body can come together for an assembly or meeting, student meetings, and really there has to be multiple, or we'd have to transition to the middle school or transition here to the high school, which often gets used a lot at the auditorium. But having that space large enough to be able to seat makes really good in terms of a principal being able to deliver a message to the student body.
yeah, thank you, Dr. Fox. So that square footage, if you were to combine your current square footage of the gym and then the square footage that I highlighted on the deficiencies, that would be large enough for a competitive gym and between 200 and 250 seat bleacher capacity. So you could at least get a grade level, 2 grade levels in there, and then also use the floor or bring in loose chairs. And then, as I mentioned, with this school, you can see all these internal classrooms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, these 4 over here. And that was just for the general classrooms. That did not account for the small group instruction and the tech ed spaces in the core of the school. The middle
Can I,
school. Yeah,
can
go
I
ahead.
ask you a quick elementary question, or should we wait until the end?
No, go ahead.
One of the things that I'm concerned about, and maybe it's not, maybe that's why I'm asking you. At one time, the cafeteria had an open ceiling. Used to be years ago before they had to add additional classrooms and stuff, and I know why they did it, because they needed the additional classrooms. But the library was above it, and that was all open. And the reason I say that is I think it cut down on the noise. Do you see that our elementary school cafeteria has a larger than normal noise problem? Because I see a lot of schools and their cafeterias are open, and ours is not. And my concern is, especially in the elementary school, I feel like it's louder because it has such a low ceiling. And I didn't know if that was something that you saw as a deficiency, or if it was, if it's too loud, if it becomes
Sure. So next month's presentation, as far as like the building systems and the finishes, that would be something that we would
Okay.
review.
Okay.
If in our analysis with acoustical wall panels
Okay.
on how can we control sound in that area, what are some of the recommendations? It could just be as simple as changing the ceiling, or maybe it's something with the flooring material.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So at the middle school, there were not a lot of program deficiencies. It was just, again, the need for collaboration spaces and also a STEM classroom or like a makerspace lab. So those are the 3 areas in blue. And then also a right-sized course room. Sorry, those are so hard to read. Like that is seriously the fine print that you would see at the end of some type of legal document, but yeah, I will definitely fail that. But not a lot of educational program deficiencies at the middle school. And then the high school, really the only areas were over on this, on the auditorium gym side of the building. There was a comment about additional cafeteria space, but that was more for a breakout for students to be able to go to that were not sitting with the rest of the student population. An auxiliary gym, which is this larger one right here, a wrestling room, which is the second one, and then some space for the music department, and in particular, support space for the drama department, where it was prep storage, a green room, things like that. So there was nothing on the other side of the high school, the academic side, the classroom side, and the second floor. So for next month, what we will do is it will be the facility assessments presentation, where we're going to come to you and we will show you the walkthrough that our consultants and our office had in the building and on the site, and what is the condition of the facilities, where are we seeing things that have neared the end of their life cycle, and what recommendations to move forward. And again, this is for long-term planning. Maybe some of those things you're just going to look at in capital improvement projects. Maybe it's also things that you want to wrap up into a comprehensive building project. And then in April, we'll come back with some options that we're looking at addressing some of these educational program deficiencies and the recommendations of the facility assessment. Any questions?
Yeah, I think I have one, and maybe it's more of a admin question. So I think most of us, perhaps, as we're looking at this, there are areas of various buildings that we've been in or that our children have been in that we've always wondered or thought, why couldn't this be revised, or why couldn't this space be used for this? Since we are not in these meetings where these comments, would it be appropriate for us to email the administration and say, this is one thing I would like to see addressed, or I don't understand why this space is here, or why this space couldn't be used for this? So would that be valuable at all to anybody, or would that be just something we wait and discuss in one of these meetings?
I think that's completely fine. I think it would be interesting to see and for us to think about as we do walkthroughs of the buildings as well. But yeah, absolutely, you may.
I mean, like specifically, personally, I'm thinking is he's talking about the music in the storage, and I'm thinking of our tech ed rooms and the huge room that's supposed to be for wood, but we really don't build a lot, and we're looking at STEM, and they still have a dark room, and we don't do photography, and like that whole area that's not, and I'm thinking, is anyone looking at that thinking, so I have those questions, but they're too probably nitty gritty, but I don't know where.
No, that room has already been rethought of and repurposed and reused, and that's a great question. We actually, that's one of my favorite things to do, is to walk and look at spaces and how can we use those spaces. And sometimes I have a little too much fun. But that space in between where we have our current electronics, wood, and then what was the dark room, actually that is a space we would love to do some things in terms of our tech ed. But I know our current teacher, when we look at our home improvements class that he's building, to do more stations and have those stations set up in an area where students are on, and that mobility on casters, to move some of that equipment around and be able to use. So there is a purposeful, thoughtful, instructional intent of those spaces.
Well, and as he was speaking, I was like, you know what, our weight room is why is our weight room where, I understand why our weight room is where it is, but then I'm thinking if that tech ed room was, if we did that over again, that would be a better place for a weight room. It would be right next to all, you know, all the athletic stuff. So I don't know how much you want us to be a part of those conversations, but what I'm hearing is what? Maybe
What you're hearing is we invite opportunities for any comments, because it always gives us another fresh perspective when we look at things as well. And as we walk and talk, and I draw diagrams for Mr. Colstock, and he's like, no. But I think it's good.
Junior architect, but no, he had some good ideas, so.
Take the architectural design class that's coming out. Then we'll see if he passes.
No, but absolutely, we welcome that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
From an overall educational point of view, it's really a lot of fun and enjoyment, actually, to talk and to think and to talk vision educationally of where we're at now and the leadership from our principals and where they see the vision, not just now, but in the future. And how can we be nimble? And I think you used a really key term that I want to keep in mind as we start and continue to have conversations, is flexibility. Not just be so rigid into thoughtfulness of one, but how are we going to continue to grow and use spaces for a lot of different purposes. Being able to have that flexibility is critical and key. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to transition now into our second device refresh discussion. So this is really a team effort when you look. There's a lot of people on the caucus agenda that are going to participate in this discussion for you. So at the end of our last caucus meeting in January, we were tasked as an administrative team to look at different options for our refresh. And at this time, we devised, and kudos to Mrs. Matash for all of her work. We met as an administrative team and came up with approximately 5. Actually, we had a lot more, and we began that process of whittling these options down a little bit. That made sense. But before we do that and we go into the presentation, I would like to share what our administrative team thinks at this point, what a good recommendation, what our recommendation would be, if I may. Our recommendation is certainly we spent time looking at the various options. At the end of our review, we believe keeping our iPad 8th generation devices for another year is an appropriate option for us. And certainly here's why. We will collect data at the end of this year regarding year 3, regarding any breaks, any needed repairs. We will then either keep those devices for an additional year or look to refresh all devices, including teacher MacBooks, in year 3. And then from there, we will go in a 4-year refresh cycle, with the key being utilizing Apple Care protection over 4 years. We know that recommending this, our goal would be recommending this for this upcoming 23-24 school year. And we also are going to make some slight changes at the elementary level based on some feedback. We want to make, and we're going to start with the 23-24 school year, of having in grades K and 2, and then a gradual release in grade 3, where at the end of the day, and the beginning of the day, student iPads will remain overnight in the charging stations in the classrooms. What this will allow is the teacher to communicate home, though, to parents if they need to give those iPads home for an extended assignment. That way, if there's something that they're working on, a creative project, something that they want them to do, they can communicate the why behind it and certainly deploy that and send that home. But we do want to make sure that they are deployed by name to each student, because there's personalization as well as many functionalities associated with assistive technology that's really important, and a student can begin to personalize their ability within that iPad. So that's our plan. If you want to see those 5 different options, we certainly are prepared, excited to share those with you, and excited for all the work that we've done.
When you had said, you said K and 2, did you mean K through 2? Okay,
Sorry, I clicked on my mic 4 different times. Yes.
okay. So explain that again, what you're thinking of doing K through 2 and then 3rd grade. You
Sure.
said.
K1 and 2, students would be assigned an iPad. That iPad would be assigned to that student. They would be taught, again, how to care for that, the different functionalities of it. They would use that through the day, but then at the end of the day, they would have that iPad remain in the charging station overnight, unless the teacher emails out to the parents or sends an informational out and says, hey, here's this assignment we're working on. We want you to, I'm just going to throw something out, take pictures of 5 different leaves so we can analyze them in our science lab that we're working on in class. And this will be an over the weekend assignment due in 5 days. Students will be able to take their iPads home during this time. So more of a communication, but they will remain in the classrooms. In grade 3, what we would do is grade 4, there's a lot of transition of classes and a lot of transition of classrooms. But grade 3, they would start in the classrooms, in charging ports, with the idea of gradual release midway through the year, or maybe a little sooner, based upon feedback from the teachers, and those students would begin that process of taking those home. Again, this is our thought process. We'll share this information out certainly to teams and team members and work out the pros, cons, and the details associated thereof. Sounds good in my head.
I have one question. So this would be a zero budget issue for this year, what you just described?
No, we would still have a lease payment of
Well,
$214,000.
but we knew that anyway, right?
Correct.
So, yeah.
That is correct.
But my concern is the impact it will have on our budget in 2 years, or I don't know how many years, when we refresh them all, plus refresh all the teachers at the same time. That seems like that's a concern, because my understanding was we would only refresh the students this year because we really, for lack of another way of saying it, couldn't afford to refresh the teachers this year. But what I'm hearing is we're going to now wait another year and then do them all at one time. But this year it's not going to be an impact on our budget. So just concerned what will happen in the future when we hit that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I think what we've said about the teacher MacBooks, the teacher MacBooks can wait another year. We know that there's some life behind a MacBook Air. There's some good life behind that. And we believe we have a year at least in there. We can certainly refresh this year, but we don't feel instructionally that we need to. There's still some value in that. I don't significantly see a major trajectory in a lease payment increasing tremendously with the addition of teacher MacBooks in there. I don't see it like, wow, that's going to be a huge increase. I don't foresee that.
And my other question, and I may not be understanding this correctly, we've been working on a 3-year lease, and you're thinking about in the future moving to a 4-year lease. Will there be a year where we won't have a lease payment? And if so, if we have that year without this huge lease payment, how are we going to find that in the next budget?
If we continue with a 4-year lease payment and keep devices for 4 years, we would be in a continuous cycle. So you won't see a year without a lease or a purchase option payment.
So just to clarify, go ahead, I'm sorry.
And part of the concept of the lease was to sell them back when they were still newer. So our lease payments ultimately are probably going to be more, i.e. inflation, but also our laptops will not be worth as much when we return them, which I think I'm fine with, but I just want to see if I'm understanding that correctly.
Dr. Jones, I think yes, there's a potential that the device resale value, the longer we keep, will be less. That's true. And I think what we have to do is look at the value to us versus the value of reselling. But I also believe there still will be a resale value, and they're graded. So it's kind of like depending on the rating and the wear and tear, if that's the right word to use, on that device. One thing we haven't done, and we will do in a future lease or purchase option payment, is include Apple Care for 4 years. And that's kind of a little extra protection for us, which will help us in the long run of any additional resale value that could help protect our assets.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So for point of clarification, right now we are on a quote 3-year lease, but we refresh every 2 years. We're not keeping them 3 years, we're keeping them 2 years. So are you telling me that we're going to go to keeping them for 4 years, keeping them a full 4 years, and not refreshing in the third year? And Christina's nodding her head yes, so I presume that that's what you mean, which is
Yes.
very different than what we're doing now.
Yes, for this current buyback cycle, or purchase cycle, or lease cycle, or whatever word we want to use for this, payment cycle, we are going to explore, right now we have been doing every 2 years. We are going to keep an additional year, and we're going to monitor the status of that to make sure that there's not any deficiencies instructionally, that there's nothing that we're missing. And if that is the case, then we may ask to keep another year, which would be 4 years on this initial lease. If we're seeing that there's failures or breakages or other elements that we're not being able to predict, we would ask to come and say, we want to get out of that 3-year and go to now a new 4-year, which we would keep then for 4 years. This one's a little unique, but our future plan is to keep devices for 4 years.
And Dr. Fox, if I may, we only have 2-year AppleCare on our devices currently, which is the reasoning why we're not sure if it could be a 3 or 4 year to keep these current devices, if that makes sense. We would upfront the next one with the AppleCare for 4 years, so we would say we were going to keep them for 4 years.
So right now then, if we keep these the third year, are we going a third year without any AppleCare on them? So we won't have AppleCare for the third year? Okay.
Can we get AppleCare for the third year? No, they won't offer it?
I had one other question. Oh, sorry, Phil, do you want to go first? I just have one, and then I think I'll be quiet. So we're an Apple distinguished school, correct? And our
Yes, sir.
teachers go out to other school districts, sometimes do presentations, go to conferences, which I love and I'm proud of. And we had all these other schools come into our school so our teachers could demonstrate all this, which it takes and I think it's amazing. I don't want to take anything away from that, but it takes our teachers out of the classrooms and it brings other people into our building where we have to take care of other people coming in, and ultimately those teachers aren't able to be in the classrooms because they're doing these things, which I think is great. And then our teachers are out presenting and they're doing these things, which again, I think is great. But I guess I'm wondering, hey, does anyone say, hey, Apple, what have you done for me lately? Because I feel like our teachers have done such a great job in our administration that we've become like a model school for Apple, and they've used us and they've used our staff. So, I mean, is there ever anything that Apple's going to be like, hey, Susquenita, you've done this for us? So, or are we just getting treated like any other school that purchased from Apple?
It's a very complex question with complex answers.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I think in terms of a major discount, no. Apple's prices are Apple's prices. They have an educational price list, and that is where it's at. In terms of professional learning, they've been an outstanding partner to provide us professional learning at times when it was at gratis. I think it's fair to say.
Right. Well, I was going to say, too, because I thought that, especially before being on school board and everything, I thought, one, I've shared with several of you, I didn't realize the, depths of the Apple Distinguished until, I almost think because it's taxpayer, there's legalities, I think, as well with certain discounts that they aren't able to, like Christine can't just go to like an Apple store and get like a discount and everything because of the type of not business, because we're a school. The same way like we couldn't get certain discounts on phone service and stuff because it would be considered a gift and things like that. I think there's a lot of that as well which does make it frustrating, because I don't disagree with you that we, brought these people in and stuff like that. And before learning about all of that, I would agree with you, like, hey, why aren't we asking for a better deal with Apple? But it comes to a lot of that because it would look like gifting and things like that. It's just, it's on the legal aspect as well, as far as certain discounts. So I think that when he says about the training and stuff like that, that's where it's looked at versus.
And there's really, I can honestly say, when it comes to somebody asking a tremendous amount of questions to get us wholeheartedly the best value that we can, I've seen Mrs. Matosh in action, and I want to take her when I buy my a brand new car because she's excellent. She really is. And she asks a lot of the questions that need to be asked.
Well, I was thinking something as simple as, hey, give us Apple Care for the 3rd year. Yeah, we'll pay for it. Yeah,
We will ask any questions. We always do.
We can charge them for all the people that came here and visited us so we can showcase all the Apple products. I don't mean to be a jerk about it, but I just think that's what
I also want to not diminish the fact that while we bring in guests to see, it also helps us instructionally too as well. And there was nothing better than to see our students engaging with adults, talking about their learning, the activities that they were involved in, the different projects that they learned and how they learned and what they did. To me, that 35 to 40 minutes made, honestly, a lasting impact on me educationally. That is what it's all about right there. So, yeah, I get it. They can give us free lunch or free lunch for the pay for lunch for those visits. But to me, it was about our students and that authentic audience that is so important when it comes to learning. Forget any test. That's what it's about. That's where learning begins and that connection starts. That's what it's all about. And that really charged up my educational senses right there and got me fired up. That's really cool.
And the pride that the students had too.
Absolutely.
I mean, just seeing their faces, how excited they were and proud of what they did and be able to share it.
Hey, Phil, I have one question. You mind if I ask mine before you ask your list? So maybe this is in the 5 options or whatever, but if we were on and I don't know if I really agree with the term lease on these, because I don't know that there really is a lease. So if we were on a 3-year lease previously, but we were getting rid of them or trading in at 2 years, if we're keeping now and we're actually making the 3rd-year lease payment and then not getting rid of the iPads until afterwards, even if they're going to be worth less in theory, we will outright own them at that point, correct? And we will be getting a full amount without having to worry about the offset of the remaining lease payment.
Yes. So we're on a 3-year lease. We make our final payment next year.
Yeah.
If we decide to keep the iPads for an additional year,
This year. We paid that payment this year.
we would not have a payment for a year. That is accurate.
Right. And
Correct?
yeah, we wouldn't have a payment, but then also, I guess I don't quite understand.
We would own those devices.
Right. So like when we were trading them in at 2 years, we still had to pay that 3rd-year lease payment or some portion of it, correct?
We were rolling that in. We were rolling that into the next lease.
To the next one.
We were
Okay.
rolling it into the next lease, but we were getting more back from the sell back.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that in theory, if we're holding on to them longer, even if they're worth a little less, everything we're getting back for them is, I hate to really even say it, but profit, so to speak, as opposed to having that negative offset of the remaining lease payment as well. To take away from it.
Yes, as long as we're not spending more to repair.
Yeah.
Which is what we'll measure.
Or the Apple Care. I mean, Apple Care is not exactly cheap, which, I mean, granted, it's, in my opinion, it's necessary, but it is definitely not cheap. So.
Sir.
Phil, you're up.
All right, question number 1.
Yes.
So, do they charge us interest on the leases? So, like, if we did a 3-year or 4-year, would it be a different price up front that got divided over the 4 years or the 3 years?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, that's my first question.
Right, they did come back and say they would give us 0%.
So if they're $1 million, they're $1 million divided over 4 years
What-
or 3 years.
Right, I mean, except this year would be $1 million plus the 200.
No, I get
Yeah,
that.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, no,
I think
I'm just-
I think I missed
I'm
that last
asking
time.
more for the future, not for necessarily what we're in now. And then my next question is, I would like you to go out and find out what a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-year-old Mac and iPad sell for right now. Because I think that I know from my iPhone that it sells for $1,300, $1,000, $700, and $200. So the drop off on that 4th year, and this is not saying that I'm disagreeing with the fact that we should go 4 years, because I think we should go 4 years. They're gonna be worth nothing in the 4th year.
I
So-
don't think we will be getting very much for it. We might get a little bit. I mean, we probably sold some 4th generations the last time, and
Okay.
I could pull that information just to show what grade C was for, 2nd, 3rd, 4 years of devices, just so we can see.
So then the other thing that I would like to see is the 4-year lease versus what 2-year leases would be with the sell-offs. So one might be 1.1 million, one might be 1.6. And is the technology that important to the school? Probably the way these things are now, no. But, realistically, when I first went to iPhone, I was getting a new iPhone every year. This
Now
one's
it's
3 years old, and other than it's laggy sometimes, it does everything it did 3 years ago.
Phil,
They don't even
one of the
support
thoughts-
them anymore.
Phil, I had a question. You said 2-year leases. Is that what you
Well,
said?
I mean, 2-3-year leases that we're selling off is what
Because
I
I think,
meant.
I don't know if you were here the last time, but I think they want to have all K through 12 all renewed at the same time moving forward.
And I'm okay with that too, but what I'm saying
Okay.
is I just want to see what the difference is of the way we refresh them every 2 years versus what it costs to refresh them every 4. And I think that I'm in favor of the 4 because, just like I said, because of the way these things work now. And then I'd also like to see what the Apple Care is for 2, 3, and 4 years. I didn't even know you could go past 2 years, but
4 is the most.
honestly now,
the most.
I don't know, and I don't know what your thing is, but we stopped carrying Apple Care on our phones at Applebee's because we can take them to Apple and get a new screen put on them for $119.
So with education, they do waive the additional $50 charge. So it does make sense for Apple Care for our devices because it's actually $0 to repair them, where anybody else would have to pay $50 to.
So
do
are
the
you still
repair.
paying the $199 for 2 years?
I don't know what it's a package. So it's a package for iPad case and Apple Care
Because
all
we
in one,
just
so you
we
get a
just
little bit of discount.
we just weighed it out and realized that if we
we-
break the screen on the phone twice, it's still cheaper to take it to Apple and have them replace the screen than it
that's-
is to buy Apple Care.
If that's the only problem.
If that's the only problem, but I haven't had any other problems in 3 years, so.
So the proposal we heard last month was to get iPad 9s, I believe. So now instead of getting one generation above what we have currently, we could get 10s, which are available now, or maybe even 11s. So we'd actually be really jumping our generation up that would be worth a lot more than if we wait.
Absolutely, and that was part of the decision and our approach right now, is between our 8th generation and 9th generation. 9th gen obviously has some features. I'm not gonna be remiss to say that's not good. But we also see the 10th generation, a little bit of a larger screen. But we're also gonna wait and see if there's something in between that may come out as well. That has some different features. The 10th gen, there's gonna need to be some. There's, in terms of earphone, headphone jack is a little bit different.
Well, no headphone jack.
Thank you. There it is. It's definitely different because it doesn't exist.
So, right, you would have to use a C headphone. Right.
So we're going to wait and certainly see what happens in terms of any.
The USB-C.
Right, it went from a Lightning to C charging. and no headphones.
Yeah, you can use an adapter, USB-C or Bluetooth.
I just have a thought, maybe I'll open up the elephant in the room. So I like the idea of waiting, which is what I had suggested last time we were here, to look into that. I'm still not in the camp of going one-to-one, and I'd like to be able to not have this be an agreement that when we enter into the next lease, that we are saying right now, we're definitely going one-to-one. So do we have this year to further discuss that, if we're going to wait the year? And that's just me, so I'm not sure that anybody else on the board agrees with that, but I just,
So-
I mean, I'm talking mostly just by the elementary school, the lower
Sure,
grades.
sure. Certainly, I think there's elements of one-to-one. Remember, we're going to make some changes to allow for those devices to be, I'm not going to use the word stored, because that sounds like they're never used, charged at the end of the day, unless there's a specific assignment associated from that teacher to the two parents. But I do believe wholeheartedly that there is a level of personalization that comes with this device, the reason for the iPad. And that personalization being from an assistive technology to apps, to being able to log in and use it. I'm afraid if they just are used as a classroom set without being personalized or assigned, that they won't get used at all. And to me, that's not an investment of the professional learning that you've done, not an investment in the assets that you provided, nor really the educational direction long term. It's a tool, not a replacement, but a tool. But a tool that is designed to be personalized for a student. And it can be done when balanced accurately and correctly.
And I understand that, and I think that there is a level of personalization that can happen gradually into the elementary school years. I struggle whether that personalization has to start in kindergarten or first grade or second grade. That you can still do that, and you can maybe even still start doing that in the later elementary years. And I know that there could be an argument going, it's only going to be an extra $100,000. Philosophically, I struggle with it. Financially, I struggle with it in terms of tax burden, because we know that these numbers have gotten really large, and they're going to keep getting larger, and we're not going to have the federal influx of money that we had to offset these leases the last time. We didn't have them before COVID. This all happened because of COVID, and we were able to manage a very robust, Apple-distinguished school environment for the high school and that collaboration down into the elementary school. And now I don't know that it's not a horse that we can't unhook the fence, unhook from the wagon and relook at it again, to go back to a manner that we were not disenfranchising our kids, but also not being good stewards of tax money.
I think I want to. I hear what you're saying, and probably a month ago, I was more in your corner. After attending a conference, I would say I've moved a little bit further. I think it's how the technology is used, and I think where we often think of assistive technology, and an iPad can be just that. It can be assistive technology. And I think when we think of assistive technology, we think of it for just our children who have an IEP or something in that sense. But I think that assistive technology can then be used, and to Dr. Fox's point, from a personalization standpoint, if even our children who are not designated with an IEP or something, the iPads can now be personalized to each of those individual students, even as young as kindergarten, to help them gain more from their learning that couldn't be done with a traditional paper and pencil experience. And with the advances that something like what we call educational technology, and you have access to on an iPad, by us having them have access to that, at that age, and we can individualize that, we are actually giving our children more opportunities for learning and more individualized learning, even in a regular education classroom. They don't have to have an IEP. They don't have to have, they don't have to jump through all the hoops, if the teachers are willing to be open to that. So I think my perception has shifted a little. Do I like what I'm hearing from the district in that they don't have to go home with them, because then they just become a tool for YouTube or, games, something like that. But can they truly be a device for learning? Yes. Then I do think. And I think there's a lot more that we need to do as a district to get there and truly unlock the full potential. But where, children who are struggling, even in a regular classroom, and we're not reaching them, we could be reaching them and far exceeding what we're currently doing.
Go ahead, Charnette, please.
My granddaughter tells me I'm electronically inept, so this is a dumb question. When these personalized things are turned back to Apple, what happens to the personalization information? Does Apple keep it?
Everything is deleted before we turn them back in or sell them.
Okay.
Yeah, everything is deleted.
I thought you could not really delete anything.
Well, I mean, the device is deleted. We can get into a conversation about if you put something in the cloud, is it really there, right? I mean, I think but for what our students are doing, we are not having them post on social media, but their device is deleted and it's cleared.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So, this related, but so if we knew there was going to be possible FID day the next day, we could send them home so the kids would have them. So I don't know how many kids K through 2 would need internet. I don't know how we're providing internet for now because they can't afford it themselves or don't have it at home. So I don't know if we would be able to get rid of that or not. I don't know.
I don't think we would get rid of that option. Right now, we do have the hotspots that are provided, and we get reimbursed through them. So we would continue offering that to families. I don't think we would stop it for K-2 just because they're not taking their devices home every day.
I don't disagree with anything anyone said. To me, we're looking at $3 million deficit next year, and we had over $2 million deficit this year. We can't continue, everyone knows this, we can't continue to operate by taking several $1 million out of our fund balance to balance our budget. So then we have to look at where are we going to save? And with inflation going like it is and people having trouble putting food on their table, I don't particularly think we want to raise taxes. We may end up needing to raise taxes. Even if we raise taxes, I think if we raise taxes as high as we could possibly get, I think we might be looking at maybe $800,000 or something. And we're talking $2-3 million deficits. What are we going to cut teachers' salaries? We just raise salaries for paraeducators, and it is simple to me whether or not we have an extra adult in that kindergarten and first grade classroom working with these children, or whether we buy them iPads. And I'm not saying they're not valuable. I'm just saying at some point, and I don't know what point or how are we going to save money in order to continue to run our school district and have funds. And I'm not saying these aren't valuable, but if we have to have them on a cart so that every other day a classroom shares them for a couple grades, I don't know. But I do think I agree with Mrs. Singley. We never planned to do, in my memory, 1-to-1 K-12 until we had to because of COVID. And I just want us to continue the conversation that we're not just absolutely saying we're going to do this, because at some point, like, we can't cut transportation costs, we can't stop heating our buildings, we can't cut teacher salaries. We got to cut something somewhere, and I don't know what. So it's not that I don't think these are valuable, but something's we all know something's got to give, unfortunately.
Can I
I'm going to say what needs to
Can
give.
I just ask a question?
Oh.
Go ahead. Pete, Mr. Bard,
Yes.
can you please tell me what our actual finish was to last year?
Last year.
Did we finish negative $2 million?
No, we finished with a net positive of $64,000.
Thank you. We budgeted for negative $2 million, but we did not finish negative $2 million. We finished in the black.
That is correct.
Correct.
Mr. Bart,
I misunderstood that, because I asked that earlier, I thought.
He said this year we're scheduled to be 1.5.
So, no, I'm saying, so she asked for the last year,
Just the previous audit.
the previous audited year.
We were scheduled to be over 2 million. I
So-
thought we still were.
No, so
Oh, so I stand corrected.
So that was the last, okay, so last year, this year, the current year we're operating under right now, we budgeted a $2.2 million deficit, Mrs. Kelly. So that's the year we're in currently right now. We are operating towards, I would say, we will finish, this is before Mrs. Kelly got here.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay, yeah, so let me give you the full scope of the conversation, Mrs. Kelly, so you have all the information.
Mr. Bart, while you're doing that, can you mention how much of that is ESSER money?
Right. So, okay, so let's back up and we'll get all the answers out in the public. So the fiscal year that ended in June 30th, 2022, that the auditors just presented right now, that audit was scheduled to, I believe, was budgeted with, I think, a $2.5 million deficit. It ended with a $64,000 budget surplus, okay? Most of that was because of revenue increases because of COVID that was offset. So some of your expenses that you would have because of that. Now, with their one-time budget influxes that would not have happened otherwise. And also because of positions that were not filled, and Mrs. Craddock had mentioned that in her budget presentation. So that was a one-time type of thing, so we got lucky. We bought ourselves a year. This year, the fiscal year that will end June 30th, 2023, which is what we're operating under right now, the budget that was passed, my first budget here, was passed with a $2.2 million deficit. We are operating, I think, and we're aiming towards probably, we passed it with a $2.2 million deficit approximately. I believe we will come in, when all said and done, somewhere around $1.7 or $1.8 million shortfall. That while it's not good, we're still projecting that. When we get to the budget presentation, you will see that I have a fund balance projection in your book. You will see that the fund balance is depleting at a rapid pace. So to Dr. Jones's point, the fund balance is depleting at a rapid pace. To Dr. Jones's point, if the board was to have to, if they didn't have a fund balance, to have to make up the $3 million deficit, just simply with taxes, they could not do so. They would not be able to do so because even if you raise taxes to your legal limit, which is 5.5% this year,
Sure.
the most you could raise revenue-wise would be about $880,000 if you raised taxes to the max. So you could not do that legally right now if you didn't have a fund balance. So that's just to put it in the perspective that you guys have right now. So that would be, to answer your question, Dr. Jones, so that would be what you said. So right now we were projecting that way, but in 2022, the one we just saw, it was $64,000.
And can I ask
And
just
the
one
initial,
other,
oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, just one other question. The Peasers
Yes.
windfall that we got, was that in 2022 or is that reflecting this year?
So the Peasers windfall was just another one of those kind of accounting things that we get. That happens like when we get an actuarial stuff that we get with Conrad Siegel, they do an actuarial thing on all of our retirees that hit our book that we don't really have to pay that. It's just something that that the state maintains a record of what we owe. That's not something that we actually have to pay in. The thing that we have to worry about that we pay in is our active employees that we have on our active salaries. And that actually those percentages that she presented actually were a little bit off because our Peasers percentage actually declined from 34.5% to 34% because of how well they performed. But that is not, so the windfall that they're talking about was more of an actuarial thing, the way that the state performed, not so much the way we have to worry about as a district. The only Peasers that we have to pay are the active employees that we have working for us. Once the people retire and they leave, that is on the state to worry about. We only have to pay that it goes on against our bottom line, how the district looks. So when you look at that negative $8 million, which is our net position, that's like if you were going to, the district was looking at if, God, I don't even know what a good fair example would be. Like if you were looking at, if somebody was looking at you to invest money in, which is illegal, but if somebody was just improper, but if somebody was looking to invest money in, like if Tim Cook was going to invest billions of dollars in the Susquenita School District, he wouldn't invest money in it because we're performing at a negative $8 million clip because of the negative PZERS investment. But they can't do that. It's not right, but that would be that net position number. It's just an accounting thing that they have to present as a position, but it's not really a logistical position. Your numbers are more so what you want to look at are your expenditures and your revenues and that kind of type of thing.
But I thought and maybe I'm not thinking right, it wasn't PZERS, but I thought there was something that benefited our bottom line from last year because we didn't, no, it wasn't the COVID money, but it was something that we didn't, our burden was not as high as what it was originally supposed to be.
I think you might be referencing our South Central Trust and our experience within the South Central Trust. And
Well, it's probably because we had unfilled positions.
Well, it wasn't that, no, it was a big chunk of
But
money.
did-
It wasn't
but
the unfilled
did
positions
our
only.
percentage go
Although
down?
that did have
No,
some.
but that would be less money we had to pay to the PZERS. That's correct. Because it's based off our employees.
So I think what she was referring to in the presentation was the South Central Trust our balance in the South Central Trust went up by $300-some thousand because of our health insurance claims. We're doing better in that than we were doing in the past, which allowed us to take what they call funding holidays. But that's kind of getting into the weeds a little bit. She really didn't get into that. I think what she was talking about, the windfall she was talking about was that PZERS thing. But it had nothing to do with us getting actual cash into our coffers. It was more of an accounting type of thing, like where it came into the state. It was just, sometimes I wish, like the accountants like to talk about the net position of the district. And while it is important, it's not really where, like, you guys or any of us really worry about it, because you guys worry about how you're going to get revenue in to fund our programs and fund our people. But it's not really, in essence, where the bread and butter really is. The bread and butter is how you're going to get revenue in and how you're going to pay expenditures and things of that nature. The net position is more of an accounting equation. Somebody next.
No, I was just going to say, admittedly, I haven't been in a classroom to see how kindergarten, first, second grader are using the iPads, but I've seen a kindergartner or second grader at home, so I know where I fall on this. I made that clear last time. But obviously, I'm open for discussion. But I would also ask that while I think if we were to eliminate iPads in those grades altogether, which I'm not hearing that we're doing, I think, unfortunately, that would still be a small percentage of cut into the, negative budget number that we're looking at. But anything's more than zero. But I would ask for you to tell us the initial budget that you presented to us. What was that negative number for the budget for this coming year? It was like 3 point something.
That was
No,
for this year.
for this coming
For the
year.
one that I'm going to, the 23-24 budget is a $3 million deficit.
Correct.
So if you were to eliminate every iPad lease, which we legally cannot do because we still owe a lease payment, if you were to eliminate the lease payment in the budget, it would take out $200,000 for everything, and that would still leave you at a $2.8 million deficit. So you would still have a $2.8 million deficit, even if you eliminated the iPads. And I still believe.
Well, and obviously I wasn't saying that. I was just making the point that even if you
well,
did,
that's
it's
and
still
I've
very
always
small
made
potatoes.
that. I've always made that kind of thing. And Mrs. Matash, there would still be a technology need. You still have to purchase technology, correct? So there'd still be an expenditure somewhere for technology at some point.
So as we transition into the budget and budget books here in a quick minute, one thing I want to bring up once again, and I will continue to bring it up, is the unfunded cyber charter mandate that exists. When we look at those numbers, with reform associated with cyber charter, there would not be that deficit the way it is. That's a cost that's not associated with anything we've done. That's a cost that we cannot control, and yet we've got to fund it, and taxpayers have to fund it. So again, let's be very clear that some things are out of our control, and that is one of them. Do I get fired up over that statement? Absolutely. Because again, here we are on the back burner, thinking of ways and cuts we need to make, when in fact, the Commonwealth and the laws don't allow us any assistance when it comes to that. Again, an unfunded mandate associated with cyber charter. There needs to be reform, and it needs to happen now. And it doesn't look like anytime soon we're getting any relief. And for anybody out there who's listening, please come visit. We have a Black Hawk Academy. We have a good, viable option. And quite frankly, so is our in-person instruction, and we're open for business. Come back. Come back and see what we have to offer. Come back, because again, if you're saying you're not paying for it, and the advertisements that are out there that it's free, it is not free. You're paying for it. You're paying for it as taxpayers. And quite frankly, when we have the tax discussion, and if we need to raise taxes, it's because of that. Let's make it very clear, it's because of that. All right, wrapping up discussion on devices, direction right now for us is direction right now for us to continue with iPad 8s for another year, allowing us to collect data and come back and share that data with you. Is that the will of the collective board? Yes. And that's what we will do. Thank you. All right, moving into my fund, the Hall of Fame Committee. I want to commend Mr. Quigley and the Hall of Fame Committee for taking tremendous amounts of time, as well as the commitment from Mr. Rob Carmo, as member of the board on this Hall of Fame Committee, to really to think of ways that we can honor, recognize, and celebrate the great accomplishments of our athletes. And really, when we look at celebrating the accomplishments of athletes, it's to also put them as a way, and as a young athletes who walk through these halls, to be able to look up, see, and say, I too want to aspire to be on that board. Mr. Quigley?
Thank you. Whoa, that's loud. I have to watch the level. I have new hearing aids, so I don't know how loud I'm talking all the time. So basically, we started this a year ago, with the idea of, and just to give you some history, about this time last year, Sherry Mikas, an alumni, was inducted into the Central Pennsylvania Athletic Hall of Fame. And I went to that ceremony knowing her, and I said, I'm thinking, we've had multiple people in that one. Why not look at our own? So that's the impetus to go forward. So we have met, and it's been a lot of people, and that's going to be the next slide. But basically, why do we want the Hall of Fame? Recognize and honor past athletes, inspire current and future athletes, and to bring back what we consider a waning sense of community. And we do things like this. We just this week, we put up 5 new pictures down the corridor in the gymnasium. The soccer teams from the last 2 years with their championships, girls track from last year, girls softball from last year, and we have the cheerleaders being, because they just got to the state, our competition squad for the first time went to states and did very well, so we put them up. And it was funny because I was walking down through, and a couple of the girls were sitting there pointing at the track win. They said, in 20 years, my kids can look up and say, that's my mom. And that's sort of the whole basis. And just with the reworked trophy case and everything else, a lot of people are coming in, and now, we sort of sell that as we go through. The track board we moved out in there. People come in from all different places, and I've gotten a lot of positive comments about how we do that. So this is just sort of an extension of that. And that's why we want to do it. If you want to put the next, thank you. So, and Mr. Carmo, chime in at any time here, because you've done all of this. All the names you see there, and Kathy Kistner and I were talking about, I'm sure we missed some, because we had people early in the process and others joined later in the process and all that. But the folks' names up there, and I really want to point out Mr. Carmo, Kathy Kistner, Andrea Harvath, and Heather Conroy, and Mary Ellen Brown and Amanda Bell. They've done so much of this, just not when we meet in person, but also emails and note-taking and all these things like that. So it's really been a group effort. And quite frankly, I was really pleased because I really thought, this might sound, I really thought I was going to have to really spearhead this. 10 minutes into the first meeting, it was out of my hands, which was, everyone just thought, everyone just was freely talking in if you want to.
I won't say anything, but you covered it.
All those people over there. Come on, there. Yeah, it must be me with this mic. I don't know. So everyone you see up there has done a great job and continues to do so. So what have we accomplished? That group has gone through and we've developed a mission statement, the nomination procedures, application processes, voting procedures, and what will become the induction ceremony. All those things are out there, and there are still parts that we are putting together. I know Kathy has to get with Rob, and they're going to go through. I'm not even, well, maybe I'll try with my right hand. But they're going to go through, and they're going to put a lot of these things in electronic form. They'll be through our website. We're going to go through and start to complete this process. But we have done all that, and there's a lot of stuff behind there. And again, I'm going to say, I think with the people that were on that committee, this fell together pretty well. We used some samples from other schools, but a lot of this was original stuff. And again, they talked through it. They bandied stuff back and forth, and I really think we have a pretty good process and coming down through. It's well thought. You want to go to the next one there, please? So where are we at? What are we done? Okay. So in February, the online application is going to be created, paper application. And that's where Kathy is getting with Rob, and she has to contact you. She actually said, I get this done with him. So March 1st, we're going to basically do a press release, and we're going to have all this information out, and we're going to basically, this is coming, and then we're going to go through and basically say that here's how you do your applications, and that's going to be the end of April. We want applications in. The committee will meet, and it's a process that is basically a nameless process to select the inductees. In June, we want to release the names of the first class. And quite honestly, we all realize the first class may be quite large. Okay, there are some guaranteed names that will be there based on the committee's recommendations, and there's some other ones. And just real quick, it's basically athletes, but it's also contributors to the programs. That covers, coaches and other folks that have been staples. They might not have been an athlete here, but they have led to that.
I know some organizations limit the number of inductees in a year. Will you guys do that, or?
There is in subsequent years a language in there about a limited number, but we said that the first one could be larger than that number based on, applicants and the things. And again, I think that's sort of normal with the first one because you're really looking back, to the formation of school back that you have to look at some of those. Then in June through September, we're going to have the sale of, we're going to sell tickets for the ceremony, prepare for the event in October during homecoming weekend is when we want to do the actual induction ceremony. Miss Brown has coordinated the use of the Lions Club, and that's where we want to do it. And we're planning on being able to do it after the homecoming dance because that's earlier, it starts earlier in the day and ends earlier, and then some of us do both, so we can get down and do that kind of stuff too. So, and I know the question always comes up, well, how are you going to do this? Well, other than just a banner, we've also talked about doing basically video interviews with the folks and then just having them scroll on our athletic website and things like that. And then we've also talked about using the television down in the gym lobby that during events, it just loops so you can see the names. and then, but make it interactive online that you can go and, hey, I want to learn about, you know, Ed Smith or whoever it will be, and then click, and then you can do them that way too. So it's pretty exciting. It's coming to fruition, and I think the committee has done an excellent job in making this a reality.
A couple comments here. Number one, great job on the trophy case down there. You can actually see things there. You dug things up. I don't know where you found some of them, but
everything in that trophy case was in the trophy case.
What is it? It was buried back there, some of that stuff. Holy cow. So, yeah, there are two German guys from, I don't know, way back when who started the wrestling program. Yeah, and I knew about them, and you found something about them. Secondly, this is a good question. It just occurred to me now. Are we going to consider people from Duncannon and Marysville high schools?
We've talked about that, and I mean, I don't, and we always say, I don't see why not, but it's.
Yeah, so part of that is the application process. If they apply and they meet the criteria, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't get included. But a lot of that history we don't have now. It's very easy to look now like, oh, who are the state champions? Oh, it's those folks up on the wall. Yeah. So if somebody knows somebody and they apply, that very well could happen. And it's not just an individual either. If there was an, like say it was an undefeated team one season, that whole team could be honored as a team.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe include teams from Duncannon and Marysville. Yeah, it'd be easier to do it that way.
But again, somebody has to do the history and the proof. You know, it's not just, oh, I like Joe Schmo, so he should be in it. We need to have, there's a whole application.
Right, okay. And last kind, I know I've said this quick before, to try to get as many of the old folks in while they're still alive. We had one pass away recently, old quarterback from the 50s who was supposed to be really good. Name escapes me at the moment, but let's get them while they can still enjoy it. Thank you for doing a great job.
Can I just ask another question? Maybe you guys already talked about it too, but I was able to be at Sherry's induction, and for those the student athletes that were there getting a scholarship, award, it was really cool for them to hear the stories of these inductees. And I'm wondering, like, in the future, and when would you ever see tying a Hall of Fame scholarship for a current student to connect them with the Hall of Fame inductee? Like, you know what I mean? That would be given at the same time.
I think that's a great idea. And, that would be something you want to
Yeah,
I know fundraising, right? Yeah, because that money has to come from somewhere, right?
Yeah, I think as the Hall of Fame gets a fund balance, that may be something that can occur. Just like the Perry County, they don't always, that scholarship, I think, goes up and down depending on how much money is available. So.
Not the athletic directors, the one from the West Shore, Pennsylvania chapter of the Hall of Fame, they gave out, they honored student athletes, but then they gave out a scholarship.
Something else you can look at, and this is, because I thought you talked about the Athletic Directors Association. If it wasn't for the Owl Society, the Owls Club.
Right. No, I was talking about the West Shore Hall of Fame. When they did it, and I don't know where they get their money from. I mean, because, and that's what I was wondering. Like,
we will have a
when
donate
you end up
now.
doing your things or whatever, could there be?
Eventually, And, not to diminish, Mr. Quick did a lot of work that, he says he didn't do a lot, but he provided a lot of background information from other Hall of Fames and other things that were done. So he did do a lot of work to get this up and running.
I absolutely would like to say that as well. I think it would have been easy sometimes at this point to say there's a lot of other things, but he took that as a goal. He took that as something he saw and wanted to honor past, but also help to drive the future. And that's what it's all about, and bringing a community together. It could be easy just to say, something like this can be a little controversial, but yet worked to develop processes, worked as a team to develop the ins and outs of it, and worked to bring communities together. So it's more than athletics. Nice work.
Thank you. Our boys are up at West Perry. The girls lost by 2, but Upper Dolphin also lost, so we are division champions. Now it comes down to a tiebreaker to figure out who we host next Tuesday. And then we should be locked in the number 6th seed for girls based on other results. So it looks like we will probably travel to Peckway Valley in a couple weeks for District 3 basketball. Tri-Valley playoffs will be next week. Bocce won 2-0 today, and they're looking good for making the postseason as well. They have another match at Line Mountain on Thursday. And honestly, if you had, I mean, we have up there, and then the playoffs will be at Lower Dolphin. It is interesting to watch. It really is, and to watch from day one to today, the increase in skill and strategy and our middle school gym floor that creates strange rolling patterns.
It is.
Back up 6 feet.
I have been at every one of the bocce matches except for the very first one that was in our gym, and it is not just our gym. All the floors are warped everywhere you go. Some are uphill, some are downhill. All of them are side to side. So
Called the home field advantage.
They're not circular. I mean, it's like, so it starts with a hole, but it is.
they're filled with. They have gel. Yeah.
On some of your golf shots, I'm sure. Literally, the ball goes by the rope is back 6 feet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Quigley, and thank you to the Hall of Fame committee for all of your time, and lots of more work to be done as we continue. And thank you for that update and the work thus far. Transition very quickly, just want to go over some elements of career and technical on the motion on the agenda as an agenda item for next Tuesday's February 14th meeting is to look at the Cumberland Perry Career and Technical Center's operating budget and are part of our Articles of Agreement. These Articles of Agreement are operating guidelines for CPCTC. We did vote in January or December, I can't recall which one it was, and I apologize, was December, thank you, to approve not only the motion to approve the building capital project, but also to open up the Articles of Agreement to allow that project to exist. We are one of the member schools of CPCTC. There are 6 career clusters, and there are 23 current programs. And right now, roughly, we have about 22, we have students in 22 of the 23 programs. Again, they have college articulations through college and high school programs, as well as SOAR, which is Students Occupational and Academic Ready. It's a state articulation agreement with a tremendous amount of schools. So it is something that I think is underutilized throughout the state. We have 78 students currently attending CPCTC, and once again, the recognition and looking at our budget comes at February, which is School Counselors Month, which is awesome, and the National Career and Technical Education Month also. The operating budget for 23-24 for us and our contribution will account for roughly 5.99% of the total operating budget. Our expected contribution is $465,529, and it is a decrease of roughly 1.79% from $474,029 from last year. This is the proposed budget by school district in the overall operating budget. You can see that will be on the agenda as well. Our percentage of increase here, you'll see the district costs, percentage of increased by district, as well as increased or decreased district cost.
Are these figures with the proposed expansion figured in or without it?
No, it's without it, because that's not going to be, if approved, will not be for the next, until the next school year. Good question.
And these are just for the operating expenses for the career and tech. The portion for the actual project will be a separate line item. So this would be just for the operating expenses.
And we'll have some discussions as to what we want to do with that debt that we will incur, how we want to manage that.
Correct, and that will be closer to when the final design is done for the program.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Rubish, I believe right now, currently, there's still one district that's still outstanding to vote yet on that project.
That is correct.
Thank you. Next steps, please take a moment when you get a chance within that draft agenda to review that budget, and we'll look to approve that on Tuesday, Valentine's Day's meeting. All right, we're going to transition now into budget and budget presentations. Before, again, I want to thank Mr. Bard for all of his work thus far and his continued work. My ultimate goal will be, Mr. Bard will be here till about April the 6th, and my job then will be to help get us over the finish line when it comes to our general operating budget for the 23-24 school year.
Is it my turn to talk now?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I just want to, I was going to give you these budget books on Valentine's Day, kind of as my Valentine's gift to you, but I decided to give it to you as early. So in any event, I wanted to walk you through these books. So the first section is a kind of an executive summary, basically explaining how we arrived at how we arrived at the numbers that we arrived at. So the main question that I think I want to address first is, how did the deficit go from 2.2 million to roughly $3 million? Well, basically, there's two main drivers in the budget that really got us to that point. The first is the big driver in the room that you guys have heard, and that is the salary and benefits piece. That accounts for roughly $625,000 of the increase. That includes the $2 an hour increase that for the support staff personnel that you guys have approved in January. It also includes another $1 an hour increase for the support staff personnel to bring them up to more competitive level playing field with other neighboring districts, to make us more competitive, because we still are outside of really a competitive structure. As Dr. Fox had read some resignations, they're leaving for other places because we are just really, really outside of the competitive level playing field. We can roll that back to the average 2.75% that we have been normally giving support staff personnel for that, and that would save probably about $80,000 on the average if we wanted to roll that back, but we'd be less competitive and not being able to be competitive with our average on retention and attracting support staff personnel. The other major cost is special education. We've had Dr. I'm sorry, I can't, I'm horrible with names. Dr. Conrad has been meeting with families during her interim employment here, and there's been an increase in services that have been necessary and outplacements that have been necessary due to an influx of students. And remember, all of our students that come in are Blackhawks, no matter what level of care or services that they need. They're all Blackhawks, no matter what. So we need to provide that level of service and care to them. And so, but that level of service and care requires an outlay of expense. And so that we have an increase of several $100,000 in there as well for that. And that has been not only because of next year, but also this year. And so that is a moving target and a moving number as we continue to go along with that. And there are some sensitive issues, so I can't really talk much about that in public. Dr. Fox can maybe talk about a little bit about that in executive session under student issues. But we can't. But there are a lot of moving pieces with that we require us to budget extensively for those pieces. So that is primarily the two reasons. There is an interesting piece of developing news that came out today. A Commonwealth court found that the funding formula in Pennsylvania is unconstitutional and is unfair, which is kind of something that we always knew, but did not provide a remedy for the funding formula, which is for Susquenita would, if if they funneled all the money into what they call the fair funding formula, would actually penalize Susquenita a little bit more than the unconstitutional funding formula. So I don't know if that would help us or hurt us because of the students that left the district and went to cyber charter schools based on our ADMs. So I don't know if we really want all the money to go through the fair funding, the quote unquote fair funding formula. So the ruling, the unconstitutional ruling, while it is a good ruling to give districts the poverty-stricken districts more money, I think we're a long way away from any truly fair funding formula in the Commonwealth. And besides, I believe that ruling will be appealed to the PA Supreme Court. So I think we're many years away from anything really being resolved. Secondly, on the revenue side of things, I kept everything consistent. We do not know what the governor's proposed budget will be. It's his first. It will be a Democratic-controlled House of Representatives in the state, which is something that we haven't had in about 12 years. So I don't know exactly how they will handle. They are flushed with money as well due to better than expected revenue collections. They do want to continue to fund the public education at a high level. So I do believe they will give us an increase in funding, but I don't know exactly to what level. If any indication is, it will be probably somewhere in a $50,000 to $100,000 increase total. But I don't want to put that in there and then we don't get it. And then we're already starting behind the 8 ball when it comes to revenue, so I don't want to do that in there. There are no large, so in the normal budget books you had pages of big budget items. This year you'll notice there are no pages like that because the administration cut out all big line item budgets, item purchases or requests for the board. This is to streamline the purchase items. There are only 2 big item purchases. One is a tractor for the maintenance department that would total a net of $65,000. That would actually, the cost of the item is actually close to $115,000, but after the trade-in, it would probably net somewhere around $65,000 of our tractor. Mr. Howell is not here to talk about that, but when we dive into the budget a little bit more next month, Mr. Howell will be here and we could talk about it a little bit more. And the other purchase item, actually 3 items, I'm sorry, there's 3. I keep forgetting the third item. Christine will kill me on the third item. But the second item is an outdoor pavilion for the middle school, an outdoor classroom where the students can get out and actually have an outdoor learning space outside of the administration building or outside of the window, outside of my window. So instead of hitting my window with balls, they could actually learn some things, and it's a very innovative idea. It's a very innovative idea that Mr. Ward and Mr. Black have. How many times I hit my window with items and things of that nature. They have an idea to build a nice little pavilion and outdoor space out there, but it would actually be built by the VOTEC, but they need to buy the material and the supplies for that, and the labor will be done by the VOTEC, and I think the material and the supplies estimated around $25,000. It is highlighted. I don't know if it's highlighted in the book, but it is included in the budget book. And the third item is a phone upgrade system. Our district phone system is becoming obsolete, and actually is obsolete and needs to be replaced. Mrs. Matosh started with an item cost of about $80,000 and has now driven it down to about $20,000 or $30,000. So she has.
Well, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, she's still in the process of working
Remember
on it.
earlier when I said if there is a negotiation at a high quality,
well, she started.
will get
Okay,
it.
so she started at 80 grand, and there's numbers floated to me that she has done a phenomenal job at driving the number down. Because when she first gave me the number, my exact words were I think it was a bad curse word, and I said I'm gonna get tar and feathered out there. I said so, but she was able to drive it down, and so it is in there. I think at the higher number. So there are some areas that we can drive down and drive down the budget. So also in your budget book is the initial iPad refresh cycle that we talked about last month. So there will be, I think, a $200,000 reduction in the deficit because there is that double kind of iPad refresh cycle in there. So that brings me to my next line. And as you notice on the expense line, there is numbers on the expenses. That is for any questions that you guys may have. We're going to upload the question sheet that we had last year, and we're going to have any questions that you guys may have on there. You can upload the question per line item, and we will answer those questions and then publicly present those questions and answers next month at the next caucus meeting, so we can have that. If you guys would like to have a secondary meeting in March while I'm still here, we can do that. The highlighted items are basically some special items that may not be there on a regular basis, and we'll need some analytics run on it. And also in the revenue piece, there may be some analytics needed to be done on the PSERS and Social Security reimbursement side. I think those numbers are a little bit low, so there may be some more revenue coming in that needs to be done. Is everything okay over there?
Yeah.
Oh.
Past table. We were reading this when it was passed out. There's like a $500,000 increase on the high school teachers.
On the high school teachers?
Yeah.
No, that was, so, okay, one more thing I wanted to talk about. So when you guys, all right, so there's one more thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about so you guys don't pass out. So, Mrs. Walburn, I know you like to go through these things very thoroughly. So I want to go through, so Mrs. Walburn's going to, and I know some others like to go through these very closely as well. So the data I gave you, that's 53 or 54 pages there. That is the actual form that I upload into our accounting system. It doesn't get more granular than that. I can't, unless I give you the actual invoices that form those totals. So I can't really get much more granular than that. But what I did is there are some still account codes that need to be updated, but there's only maybe about a dozen or so left. Last year's budget was grossed up. What I mean grossed up is added together into more groupings. I broke out the groupings even further so that now some of the numbers look like they're multi-$100,000 increases, but there are some that have $100,000 decreases. So if you look at the total, really the bottom line total increase was that $1.2 million increase, or that, yeah, no, was it the $800,000 increase, I guess, because the deficit went from $2.2 million to $3 million. So the overall deficit increased by that much. That's kind of the barometer as to how you know if the deficit is appropriately going up or not, because I did go through this, literally 4,000 lines. I went line by line through this and ensured that things were there that should be there, that things weren't there were taken out, and that things, like I said, there are some account codes in the 3200s that are not appropriately coded correctly and I need to be changed. I noticed that after I printed 400 or 500 copies or 500 pages. So, because I was getting these, I don't want to give you a Valentine's gift. I wanted to give it to you the week before Valentine's Day. So I wanted to make sure this wasn't a Valentine's gift. It was Dr. Fox's idea to give you a Valentine's gift. So remember on his evaluation that it was a Valentine's gift, you know what I mean? No, no, I'm not married, so that's why.
That's why.
Yeah.
That's
No.